Today's lesson is from section 1.3, Algebraic expressions. Here we just kind of wanted to touch on factoring, looking at some particular factorings that you might come across when we're simplifying functions and those kind of things. So remember, when you're factoring, you want to first look for your greatest common factor. The second thing is after, if you've taken something out or not, you want to next look for special factoring, like perfect square trinomials, or perfect cube, like sum and difference cubes. Also grouping is in that special factoring realm. Difference of squares, those type of things. And then if none of those work, then you want to factor as normal if possible. If it doesn't factor after that, then you are already in simplest form. So don't think that every single thing has to be factored. Some may not be factored or factorable. Okay? Now, one thing in pre-calculus that I'm pretty sure you haven't seen in other classes is that you're going to start seeing negative exponents for your factorings. So remember, you're always trying to take the greatest common factor that they all have, but in this case, you're gonna have to change the way you think about it, because negative 1/2 is the biggest thing that they all have in common. They all have x's. They all have a 3 in common. Okay, remember, you're dividing. So, and most kids would say that the 1/2 is the biggest thing that they all have in common, but it's actually the negative 1/2, okay? Because they all have the x in common, but they all have a negative 1/2 x. So you almost have to go to the smallest exponent to find the greatest common factor in all of these, okay? So here, you're going to take out a 3 and an x to the negative 1/2, okay? Now remember, it's like dividing. How about I move this down a little bit so we can talk about that. Okay, so remember, it's division, so 3x to the negative 1/2, 3x to the negative 1/2, and 3x to the negative 1/2. Okay, so remember, when you're dividing, use your exponent properties. 3 divided by 3 gives you 1, because x and x are like bases, and you're subtracting when you have a quotient. So then 3/2 minus a negative 1/2 okay, that makes a double negative, so that gives you 3/2 plus 1/2, which is 4/2, which is 2. So you're left with x squared there. Then negative 9 divided by 3 is negative 3. Then 1/2 minus a negative 1/2 gives you 1/2 plus 1/2, which is 1, so it gives you x. And then 6 divided by 3 gives you 2. And then x to the negative 1/2 divided by x to the negative 1/2. Okay, they actually cancel each other out because they're opposite signs, so then it just leaves you with 2. So then now, since you took out the greatest common factor, now you can move on to other factoring. So here, there's no special factoring for that one because it's not a perfect square, but it is a normal trinomial that you can factor. So we put out our parentheses. Remember, we're looking for factors of 2 that add up to negative 3. So then here, 2 factors of 2 are 2 and 1. That's all you have to choose from, and 2 and 1 add together to get you 3. So we just need to give them both a negative sign to make them get there. Okay, so then that would be, let's make that 2 a little bit easier. Okay, and so that would be our factor. Okay, next one, similar. We want to first look for our greatest common factor. Here they both have a 2 plus x in common. And so here the greatest common factor is going to be the smallest exponent again, so negative 2/3. So I'm going to take out a negative 2/3. Okay, so then here, now, if you take that out, remember dividing, so negative 2/3 divided by negative 2/3 leaves you with 0, so it leaves you with x for that first one, and then 2 plus x, negative 2/3, okay, so 1/3 minus a negative 2/3, double negative makes a positive, so 1/3 plus 2/3 gives you a 1. So then here you're left with 2 plus x to the first, okay? But you can drop that because anything to the first doesn't matter about the parentheses, okay? So then you really can put your stuff together there because you have like terms. So you get 2 plus x to the negative 2/3 power times 2x plus 2. Now here, because you have a 2 in common, that's another thing you can take out. And I put it all the way out in front, so that leaves you with x plus 1 on the back side there. So that would be your factoring, okay? Now sometimes they don't ever have any greatest common factor to pull out, but this is another one of those special things that you need to recognize. It's called grouping, okay? I mentioned it before. Grouping happens when you have 4 terms that none of them all have the same thing in common, but if you split them up into groups, then the groups have something in common that you can factor out. So it's like another way of thinking about it's a double factoring, because you can take factors out of both of the parentheses. So what x cubed and x squared have in common is x squared. Notice that that's the smallest number, and so that leaves me with x plus 1. The other one has a 4 in common, so I take out a 4, so it leaves me with x plus 1. For grouping to work, you need to have the parentheses that are left to be exactly the same, or it doesn't group, or you can't use this technique. So since they are the same, x plus 1 and x plus 1, so you can factor out an x plus 1, and then that leaves you with x squared plus 4. Okay. Now check to make sure if any of the things that you have left have something you can factor out. X squared plus 4 is not a difference of squares because it's a plus sign in between, so it does not factor. So then that would be your solution. Okay, try it with this next one. So group, because there's nothing in common between all 4 terms. I group the first 2, so you can take out an x squared again there. Okay, that leaves us with x minus 2. Here, to make sure it matches, make sure you check on your signs as well, because if we just take out a 3, that leaves us with negative x plus 2, which is not the same as x minus 2. So I want to take out a negative sign with that, and that'll make it x minus 2, which changes all the signs. So now these match. So now I can take out an x minus 2, and that leaves me with x squared minus 3. Okay. Now here you could factor x squared minus 3 because it is a minus sign, but the factoring looks weird because you'd have radicals. So if you choose not to, that's fine. But you could write x minus square root of 3 times x plus square root of 3 if you would like to take it all the way down to that form. But usually radicals are not considered part of simplest form, so if you leave it at x squared minus 3, that is perfectly fine, and that's what I would leave it as well. Okay? Have fun!